got these medications that are literally shutting down the hormones in the female body that create this cyclical life-giving nature of women. We basically told women these hormones don't matter. Your ability to create the most miracle of any miracles, which is create life, just shut it down. There's no impacts.
It seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill and for rewilding sex, returning the danger to sex, returning the intimacy.
Hi, I'm Ileana. If you're new here, I talk about the intersection of politics and parenting, and today we're going to talk about anti-birth control propaganda. Birth control skepticism is rising, and a huge reason for that is the surge of anti-choice influencers and anti-birth control trends. They run the gamut from regular young women who are just kind of publicly wondering about the side effects of birth control to doctors who use their platforms to push misinformation.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but birth control was not designed to empower women. It was actually designed to suppress them and disconnect them from their natural God-given biological cycle. Yeah, because if it was really about empowering women in the first place, we would have been taught from a very young age how to track our cycle and avoid pregnancy naturally. Yep, but no one's ever taught that. So, no, I don't think it was about empowerment.
What do you mean no one was ever taught that? Some people were definitely taught that. But yeah, what a cool hot take from evil Harley Quinn over here, who uses her title of doctor to convince people she's an authority on the topic of women's health. So, is she an OBGYN, an endocrinologist, family medicine doctor? No, of course not. Go ahead. Take a guess what kind of doctor she is. You already know. You for sure already know. She's a chiropractor. The idea that birth control messes with your hormones is something that a lot of people say when they're talking about why they're skeptical of the pill. Like, right. That's the point. It's supposed to affect your hormones. Before we get further into this video, here's a quick breakdown on how birth control works from an NP.
People tell me all the time they don't want to be on birth control because it changes their hormones. Yes, that is how it works. That is how it prevents pregnancy. Hi, my name is Haley. I'm a women's health nurse practitioner, and I like talking about women's health topics that are not talked about enough. If you're using a hormonal birth control, we're giving you doses that do not replicate the normal menstrual cycle. Because if you are having a regular menstrual cycle, you can ovulate and get pregnant. So yes, your hormones are messed up. That's how the birth control works. So if we're giving you a pill that has estrogen and progesterone in it, it is telling your body, hey, don't make your own. We got you. But what we're giving you won't allow you to ovulate or allow anything to connect together to make a baby. If I check your labs and you're taking a hormonal birth control, your labs, your blood, is going to tell me what the pill or whatever patch, vaginal ring, whatever it is, it's going to tell me what those are. Because your body is turned off because it's like, hey, but this other thing's already supplementing. I don't need to make my own. There are obviously a lot of non-hormonal ways to prevent pregnancy. But if you are looking at a birth control, yes, it is impacting your hormones. That is how it works.
The point of hormonal birth control is to affect your hormones. Like, that's the whole point. I'm gonna close this drawer because this is gonna bother me. So let's address a claim that is all over social media. Birth control leads to infertility. This specific sentiment is on so many videos. I couldn't even come close to finding them all. This is the message. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that birth control pills were given out like candy to millennial teen girls, and now IVF is over a $50 billion market. Birth control creates customers for life. If you are on social media, I can almost guarantee that you have seen this message at least once. So let's get into this, because if you think about it for even 1 second, there's an explanation for it, right? Birth control allows you to get to an older age without unplanned pregnancies. When you're older, your likelihood of infertility increases, not because of the birth control, just because of your age. Birth control lets you make it to your 30s without getting pregnant accidentally, and then when you're in your 30s, you're probably more likely to need IVF or other fertility treatments because you're in your 30s. The same thing would be true if you were just abstinent, right? Like if your form of birth control was abstaining from sex until your 30s, you would also be more likely to need fertility treatments. It has nothing to do with the birth control. Also, Many people who are put on birth control at a young age have other symptoms or diagnoses that the pill might treat, like heavy or painful periods and irregular cycles. This is something that anti-birth control activists talk about all the time, that people are put on the pill because it's like a miracle drug and it helps with acne and heavy periods and all of these other symptoms. But the thing is, these symptoms might be caused by other reproductive health issues like PCOS or endometriosis or PMDD, which can have effects on fertility. So again, it's not the birth control that is affecting the fertility. It is the pre-existing issue that's affecting the fertility. Birth control was used as a treatment for the pre-existing condition like PCOS or endometriosis. And when you go off of the birth control, it's not that you're suddenly infertile, it's that you still have the problems that you had to begin with. There's also this common trend where influencers hold up the patient package insert from their birth control box and marvel at how big the sheet of paper is. Sometimes they like wrap themselves in it like a dress, or they hold it up next to like their outfit and they're like, oh my God, look at this crazy huge piece of paper. A patient package insert is an FDA-approved label containing crucial user-friendly information about risks, benefits, and safe usage of prescription drugs. All prescription drugs, not just birth control. So yeah, it's a long sheet of paper. It contains a lot of information. A lot of teens are taking birth control, and it's the first medication that they're really taking without like the support of their parents. So while their parents would have previously seen like the patient package insert in the antibiotics or in whatever other medication they might get from like a pediatrician, kids are probably not looking at that, but teens are going to look at what comes in their birth control box, and then they're stunned by how large this piece of paper is. The thing that always cracks me up about these is like, you know what else looks like that? The instruction packet for my hair dye. Like, they have to include some of this information on all sorts of products. It's so funny that they have an issue with this one, and it's just further proof that this is like subtle anti-birth control propaganda. Here's an example of an article from Evie Magazine, and we're going to talk about that propaganda later in this video, but let's start with this. They told us motherhood could wait, then sold it back to us at $12,000 a round. The IVF and abortion industries don't care about the right to family plan. They care about money. They profit off of women delaying marriage and motherhood. The longer we wait, the more we need their services. Egg freezing, IVF, abortions, all billion-dollar markets. That's the caption. This myth is subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, pro-natalist propaganda. The Heritage Foundation, which is the organization behind Project 2025, has been very open about the fact that they want to restrict contraception in addition to like banning all abortion. They push for people to have more children at younger ages because they know that's the best way to control people.
If you're not encouraging your children to grow up and have the courage to get married and have kids, more kids than they can afford before they think they're ready, it is high time to start.
Let's watch a video from the Heritage Foundation.
I hear from a great many young women who were put on the pill at the age of 14 and came off it, so maybe 10 years later, and realized they'd done a complete personality flip, and actually they, you know, I was, you know, one said, and I quote, I thought I was bipolar. But then it turned out actually it was just this psychoactive substance that I'd been. What were they doing to me? And this is all, and this was all to the purpose of rendering a woman receptive to what is, for the most part, loveless and sometimes extremely degrading sexual access. And I struggle to see in what way that's in women's interests. And given the great many other things that, to my eye, are downstream of the entry into that paradigm, it seems to me that a good place to start would be a feminist movement against the pill and for rewilding sex, returning the danger to sex, returning the intimacy, and really the consequentiality to sex. And a great deal follows from an intentional reconnection of women's opting intentionally to reconnect with the fullness of our embodied nature.
Come on, guys, we just have to return the danger to sex. This entire video is crazy, but the first thing that she says is that a bunch of people start taking birth control at like 14, and then they have a complete personality shift that they notice 10 years later. Okay, that's also just called growing up. Were you the same person at 14 as you were at 24, whether or not you were on birth control? No, that's like the entire process of adolescence, right? At 14, you are just entering your teen years. And at 24, you're a young adult. Of course, you're not the same person. Of course, your personality has shifted. Okay, the next thing we have to talk about in that video is that birth control is not a psychoactive substance. They think they can just lie about these things and get away with it because it's worked for so long. People just believe the things they hear. Also, we don't need to rewild sex or reconnect the fullness of our embodied nature. If you didn't grasp what she meant by that, it's the pro-natalist messaging that women are made to be breeders, that our embodied nature is to be a vessel for childbirth. And that's what the far right wants. More babies, not just more babies, specifically more white babies. They also want more stay-at-home moms, more people overwhelmed with childbearing and child rearing, more people who don't have the capacity to actively participate in democracy and fight for their rights. That's the entire position of the Heritage Foundation. One of the other ways that we see the anti-birth control pill movement taking shape is through the push for natural family planning and the FDA-approved Natural Cycles app. We've seen influencers across the spectrum talk about this app, from Bachelor contestants to fitness influencers. Let's watch a few examples.
I've been working in fitness for 5 years now, and the number one question I always get asked is if I'm on birth control. I feel like hormones are such a hot topic nowadays, especially in the fitness world, so I wanted to talk about it. For the past 2 years, I've been using the Natural Cycles app as a hormone-free form of birth control. I used to be so clueless on my body and my bloating and my menstrual cycle, but until I started using the Natural Cycles app, I started to really understand why I was bloating and what phase of my cycle I was in and how it affected my moods and my performance in the gym. Using the Natural Cycles app has been so empowering for me, and it's just given me permission to breathe when I am going through my luteal phase, because I know that it's temporary and I know why it's happening. It basically works to analyze biomarker data, so things like your temperature, your heart rate, your cycle history, to tell you if you're fertile or not. All you have to do is wear a compatible wearable overnight, so anything like an Oura ring or an Apple Watch or a Natural Cycles band. It basically gives you personalized fertility insights and also takes into consideration any shifts in your ovulation. And only because I know people ask, it is 93% effective with typical use and 98% effective when used as intended, which basically means you abstain on days when the app tells you to. If you've also been looking for a non-hormonal form of birth control, or you just want to learn more about your body, you can use my code to get 15% off your annual subscription. I've been loving it, and I hope this helps.
Before we get further into this, I also just want to mention that if this is what you're using for birth control, it's a really expensive option. Most birth control in the US is covered by insurance, and those birth control options don't require any like extra things, as opposed to this app, which requires a subscription and also some sort of like fitness wearable, like an Oura ring that's like $500, or an Apple Watch, which can run the price from like $300 to $1,000. Like, that is a very expensive option.
Hi, I got off of hormonal birth control almost 4 years ago exactly. I've been tracking my cycle naturally for over 3.5 years. I've lived with my now fiance for 3 of those years. We've been together for almost 6 now. We have never once had a pregnancy scare, and tracking my cycle has completely changed my life. It has been easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. I know that's not everyone's case. If you have an irregular cycle, of course, that's going to affect your tracking cycle experience, and I completely understand. Getting to the root of your irregularities is definitely really important. But for all the girlies out there that are maybe thinking about getting off of hormonal birth control, but you're scared shitless because you're like, I don't want to get pregnant, I'm here to help you. I am your new big fucking sister.
Okay, I'm gonna pause there because that's a really long video, but you get the point.
How can we prevent pregnancy without hormonal birth control? First of all, we're made to believe that our bodies are just random and crazy, and that we can get pregnant any time of the month, even on our period sometimes. This could not be further from the truth. It is time that we start learning about our bodies and about our hormones. We can only get pregnant while we're ovulating. If we're not ovulating, we're not getting pregnant. The only other way that you could get pregnant while you're not ovulating right now is if you have unprotected sex in your follicular phase, and then the sperm can live up to 3 days, and then you start your ovulation. That is the only other time that you would be getting pregnant. So really, the only time of the month that we have to be careful about getting pregnant is about the first 10 days to 2 weeks after our period and bleeding stops.
10 days to 2 weeks after your period is literally half the month. If you're saying you have to be careful about getting pregnant for 2 weeks out of the 28-day cycle, that's 14 days.
After ovulation is done, the egg has dropped, and our body is starting to accept the fact that we didn't get pregnant and we won't be getting pregnant that month. So after we're done ovulating, we will not be getting pregnant for the rest of the month until we start the cycle all over again.
Okay, again, this is another really long video, so I'm going to stop there, but she goes on to say, get an Oura Ring, download the Natural Cycles app. That's the best way to prevent pregnancy with non-hormonal birth control, right? Like, that's the whole point of this video. The issue is that while tracking your cycle can be an effective way to prevent pregnancy, it requires strict adherence to tracking your data and doesn't always work for people with irregular cycles. And yes, tracking your data with like an Apple Watch or an Oura Ring can be easy, but sometimes that doesn't even give you enough information. Let's do a really quick birth control lesson. There are basically 3 levels of effectiveness when it comes to birth control. Most effective, which is things like an implant or an IUD or sterilization. Less effective methods of birth control, like the injection, the pill, the patch, the vaginal ring, and then the least effective methods of birth control, which are condoms, cervical cap, spermicide, diaphragm, pull-out method, and fertility awareness-based methods. And one of the influencers talked about that. She said with like average use, it's 93% effective. That is not that high. If you think about 100 people, that means 7 of them are getting pregnant in a year using this method. That is not that effective, especially when there are other options that are like 99, 98% effective. Let's watch someone who breaks down the science.
The way I would actually be pregnant if I listened to Natural Cycles this month. Natural Cycles, be real. Be actually for real, because this is actually dangerous. It has been giving me green days, meaning I'm no longer fertile for 3 days. But here lies the problem. I am literally ovulating right now. I need to show you visuals. We are all on the same page. It's telling me that I ovulated on day 19 and I am infertile as of day 23. But let's look at the aura temperature, my thermometer, and cervical mucus all in one chart. The blue is aura, red is my thermometer. Here's where it gets scary. According to Natural Cycles, I ovulated on day 19, and by day 23, I am no longer fertile. The problem is that I am literally having peak fertile cervical mucus on these days. My temperatures have not indicated that I've ovulated. I'm ovulating today. Even these Oura Ring temperatures, there is no indication of ovulation. In order to confirm ovulation, you need your temperatures to rise higher than the previous 6. You'll need at least 3 higher temperatures to confirm ovulation. Thank goodness I know how to track ovulation, because Natural Cycles is telling me that I am infertile when I'm actually the most fertile. You may think this is no big deal, but this is literally how unplanned pregnancies happen. I'm not saying to not use Natural Cycles. You need to know how to interpret your chart and track cervical mucus, because I don't want you to have an unplanned pregnancy.
While doing this research, something that I saw a lot was people saying like, oh yeah, you can't rely just on the Natural Cycles app. You should also be checking your LH levels, which is like whether or not you're ovulating. You can get little strips to pee on. And you should know about your cycle, and you should be taking your temperature another way, not just with your Oura Ring. And you should know about your cervical mucus. And like, that is so many steps. When you take the birth control pill, you just take the pill at the same time every day. And that's it. You don't need to be checking all of these other things. So even if it is 97% accurate when you use it entirely correctly, it's obvious that there are a lot of ways to use it wrong. The promotion of fertility awareness methods for birth control always leans on the same points. I wanted to get off hormonal birth control. It made such a difference in my mental and physical health, and it's a great way to prevent pregnancy. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, it doesn't prevent pregnancy. No way I'm pregnant again. It's only 8 months. I'm breastfeeding and I tracked my cycle. Ooh.
The way I would have ended up pregnant 3 different times if I had relied on Natural Cycles instead of knowing how to read my biomarkers. I have seen way too many people fall accidentally pregnant using this app. Either their safe day was not a safe day, or the app confirmed ovulation in such a weird way. The thing that bothers me the most about Natural Cycles is that it's basically the rhythm method and using basal body temperature. The app does not take into account cervical mucus changes, and they go so far to say that it's too complicated for each person to learn. So what happens when your app is saying you're good to go, but you ovulate earlier than normal? Or they determine ovulation has happened already, but it was a false rise in temperature. And look, you may have regular cycles, but you have regular cycles until you don't. You may have a one-off cycle where you ovulate earlier, and Natural Cycles would have no idea that happened until after your temperature rise. That's because basal body has nothing to do with opening your fertile window. Tracking your basal body temperature is a retrospective biomarker. It only confirms that ovulation has taken place. Whereas cervical mucus is a prospective biomarker. It gives you the signal that estrogen is starting starting to rise, and that is what opens your fertile window. So am I saying to delete the app and never use it again? No, but I am saying to take everything the app says with a grain of salt. If you still want to use the app, learn an actual FAM method, be confident in tracking your biomarkers, and learn how to interpret your chart on your own.
Take this as your sign to not trust your natural cycles app. I got off birth control to use this app as birth control. I have the Aura ring, so it takes my temperature every day at the same time. I've been using it as you should with the green day. And yesterday I get this message that they were wrong about my ovulation and 5 green days are no longer valid. That's more than half of the green days they gave me. But natural cycles say you can trust your green days even from the very start. I've used this perfectly and all of these green days are invalid. And my Aura ring is showing me minor signs of stress. I don't know if that's stress because I think I'm pregnant or because I'm actually pregnant.
Can the Natural Cycles app be effective? Sure. Does it also lead to more unplanned pregnancies than hormonal birth control? Yes. So birth control skepticism, which is popular on the far right with pro-natalists, has its teeth in the left as well. The skepticism relies on messaging about health concerns, becoming empowered by being in touch with your body, looking for holistic and natural alternatives, the fact that birth control is targeted at women and not men, and this counterculture idea that birth control has been the norm and so we should question it and push back. A lot of people on the right who are anti-birth control actually argue that the shift away from hormonal birth control started on the left, with crunchy hippies who reject big pharma and want to live off the land. And the thing is, we know there's a far left, health conscious, natural living to make America healthy again to right-wing conspiracy pipeline. It's scary because it's a very real possibility, except no, it's not. This is just fear-mongering. It's the same way that people get sucked into tradwife content. They want to find natural alternatives for cleaning products. They want to make home-cooked meals instead of buying processed foods. They want to grow things in their garden and return to the land. It starts from a very innocent place, but it gets dangerous quickly. It's easy to start by thinking, I've been on the pill since I was like 16 and I'm so used to it. I kind of wonder if I'd notice any physical or emotional changes if I stopped taking it. But the second that you look up going off birth control, you'll be inundated with misinformation. Rumors and anecdotal evidence are key to this narrative. People constantly make unfounded claims about what can happen to your body after you've been on the pill for years. They'll say things like it can lead to an increased miscarriage risk or metabolism changes, and they'll say things like your body needs a break from the synthetic hormones. And of course, they'll say that it leads to infertility. But this kind of messaging is entering the more mainstream media as well. Listen to what content creator Haley Lickstein says about popular wellness influencer Jay Shetty.
I don't know how many ways to say they are coming for birth control. On Purpose with Jay Shetty is a top-ranked health and wellness podcast with over 500,000 monthly listeners and over 35 million monthly downloads. He has over 2 million Instagram followers, and this week, he used his platform to post a clip titled "The Long-Term Consequences of Birth Control" to his main feed and feature it on his podcast. The episode is with Dr. A, who is known for her celebrity patients, segments on politically charged shows like The Dr. Phil Show, and for not taking insurance. Every single day, we are seeing more examples of mainstream culture helping to normalize and fuel the attacks the Republican Party have on birth control. This messaging campaign is intentional, it's professional, and it's strategically timed to help build broad public support for one larger end goal: eliminating access to contraception in America, making sure that young women don't leave the Republican Party in troves when they do eventually take it away, because that is their goal. Today, 121 million Americans, over 1/3 of the country, live in states actively restricting or attempting to restrict contraception. And we know that in 2022, Justice Clarence Thomas called for revisiting Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court case that guaranteed the right to birth control. Cultural messaging is strong, it's intentional, and it's part of their propaganda campaign, because they know when you're watching Jay Shetty, you're not thinking about the political ramifications and messaging campaign behind it. Birth control is the single most powerful tool for women's economic mobility and autonomy in modern history, and that scares them.
Like she said, it's entering mainstream culture, and our government officials have made no effort to hide their concerns about birth control. Wellness influencer and Surgeon General nominee Casey Means wrote on her website, "It has been It has been. Come on, Casey, get yourself a copy editor. It has been an incredible journey to get off all exogenous hormones over the past few years, as I have learned more about the horrifying health risks of hormonal birth control on the female mind and body. As I have gotten off hormones, I have been able to become much more in tune with my feminine nature and more in touch with my menstrual cycle. And now I am so intensely grateful for it. It keeps me connected with my role as a life-giving force of nature, and a period is the ultimate biofeedback tool. Nominee for Surgeon General. On Tucker Carlson's podcast, she said we have a disrespect of things that create life. Let's watch the clip.
So as a woman, I mean, I do think, of course, these drugs have helped in some ways, but we are prescribing them like candy. We're prescribing them for acne. We're prescribing them for PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, the leading cause of infertility in the United States, which is a metabolic issue driven by our food, and how the food interacts with genetics. And then, of course, for birth control. So you've got these medications that are literally shutting down the hormones in the female body that create this cyclical life-giving nature of women. We basically told women these hormones don't matter. Your ability to create the most miracle of any miracles, which is create life, just shut it down. There's no impacts. That's crazy to me. And as I've woken up from this, I'm realized like your cycle and having these hormonal cycles is part and parcel with our health in every possible way, and also with the miracle of creating life. And so for years, you just lose the biofeedback of what's happening with your cycle. It is one of the key barometers of female health. How is your cycle doing? Is it regular? Is it heavy? And we just shut it down and say there's no repercussions for that, which I think gets to a larger issue, which is a disrespect of life, right?
Yes.
It's a disrespect of things that create life.
Ugh, everything about that makes me cringe. She's using like every Maha phrase. When you hear those things, you should immediately have red flags up. Like biofeedback, red flag. Life-giving nature, red flag. Anything about human design, red flag. And she's not the only one. We're seeing more and more overlap between influencers and government officials, with high-ranking MAGA officials wielding their power to create large social media platforms, and influencers leveraging their platforms to get jobs in the White House. Katie Miller, a former Trump spokesperson and wife of Stephen Miller, told CNN, birth control is poison. The most feminist thing you can do for yourself is not take birth control. They're trying to co-opt feminism to push their anti-feminist agenda. It's the same thing that we saw in the Heritage Foundation video that we watched earlier. This message that the most feminist thing you can do is stop taking birth control, which, like Haley Lichtenstein said in her video about Jay Shetty, birth control is the thing that has given women the most economic advantage that we've seen in modern history. It allows women to take part in the workforce in a different way. It allows women to avoid unplanned pregnancies and participate in the democracy that they are part of. Now let's get into birth control misconceptions, because young people have a lot of misconceptions about the safety of birth control. For example, half of young people incorrectly believe that taking a break from birth control pills is necessary for health reasons. Half also worry that birth control has dangerous side effects, and a third worry that using birth control will affect their ability to have a baby later in life. Part of the reason is because of the misinformation and disinformation online. Okay, so first, she's presenting this like it's some sort of like new study or new information. It's a review of the literature. Let me be incredibly clear about something. Celiac disease is not caused by birth control or by coming off of birth control. According to the Mayo Clinic, celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the immune system reacts to gluten, sometimes causing damage to the small intestine. The Cleveland Clinic explains signs and symptoms of celiac disease can appear at any age. Celiac, like other autoimmune conditions, has a genetic component. And again, the Cleveland Clinic says almost everyone with celiac disease has one of these gene changes, HLA-DQ2 or HLA-DQ8. So for Lucy Fink, who has over 1 million followers across her social platforms, to use her influence to push misinformation like this is irresponsible at best. Now we're gonna watch another birth control misinformation video.
Birth control made me go blind, and here's how. I was 18 years old, about to get married, so my physician recommended I start birth control pills.
I didn't want to, but she made me feel pressured. I started getting massive headaches. My PCP told me it was just stress and I should try to get a massage. The pain continued and my vision started to blur. But by the time I found the help I needed, it was too late. The synthetic hormones cause pseudotumor cerebri, a buildup of cerebrospinal fluid that squished my optic nerves to death. I will never see it again. No one told me the hidden risk of birth control, so I'm going to spend the rest of my life telling everyone else.
What this woman went through is deeply upsetting, but it's also incredibly uncommon. I also want to point out that anytime you see content like this, it's worth doing a little digging to see what their motivation is for sharing. For example, this woman is a pro-life advocate who uses her platform to try to influence young people to avoid birth control and abortion and restrict reproductive care. She is sharing her story in an effort to scare people away from using birth control. She positions it as just providing information for people, but that's not really what her motivation is. Here's another example. This woman claims your anxiety is caused by birth control based on nothing. So let's see why she's pushing this narrative. You were put on birth control to balance your hormones, right? But now you're dealing with anxiety, emotional outbursts, and mood swings so intense you barely recognize yourself. This is common, but let's be clear, common isn't normal. Here's what birth control has been doing behind the scenes: depleting mood balancing minerals, disrupting your gut microbiome, slowing detox pathways, which leads to inflammation, which leads to dysregulated nervous system. These imbalances build quietly until one day you're anxious all the time, snapping at the smallest thing and lying in bed with a racing mind. Birth control didn't cause your anxiety. It poured gasoline on what was already smoldering. My approach is different because while everyone is focused on balancing hormones, I'm dialed in on rebuilding the foundation. Because without this, you're basically booking an endless pass on the mood swing roller coaster after stopping the pill. That's why I created the Birth Control Breakup Accelerator, Anxiety Track, my 6-week private one-on-one coaching program. This is for women ready to finally heal their mood and safely transition off birth control with expert support. There it is. She's trying to sell you her course. It's always something like this: a course, a supplement, a workout regime. It's always about money. Now we need to talk briefly about Evie Magazine. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I have an entire deep dive on Evie Magazine planned, but if you haven't heard of Evie, it's an alt-right women's publication dedicated to celebrating femininity. It was founded in 2019 by Brittany and Gabriel Hugo Boom, and it peddles tons of right-wing conspiracies, from anti-vax information to Pizzagate conspiracies to transphobic content to anti-birth control propaganda. The Hugo Booms also released a cycle-based fitness and wellness app called 28, which was funded in part by conservative venture capitalist and Epstein associate Peter Thiel. The magazine and associated website and social media talk regularly about the downsides of birth control, citing one-sided studies and inaccurate reports alongside anecdotal evidence from women who had bad experiences. Here's one example: why hormonal birth control is, scientifically speaking, poison. They talk about a lot of different issues as you click through these slides, but it's worth pointing out that they say birth control is poison without citing a single source. They claim the side effects they mention are common without sharing any information about how common or rare each side effect is. When you say something is common in terms of medication, that could mean anything. Is it 1% of people who experience it? 50%? Obviously, some of these side effects are far less rare than others. For example, it's much more likely for someone on birth control to experience a lower libido than it is for them to experience blood clots or stroke. But they frame all of the side effects as simply common. They say they want women to have more access to scientific information with regards to birth control, but they don't actually provide scientific evidence. Links to their sources? Nah. Peer-reviewed studies? No way. Sharing these talking points on Instagram without any references is textbook fear-mongering. And the thing is, they do make some valid points, like the fact that there is sometimes a lack of informed consent. People do want more information about birth control, specifically from their doctors. The vast majority of young people, 85%, want to receive birth control information from their healthcare providers, yet only 42% received information from this source in the past year. Influencers and social media accounts like Evie Magazines are trying to fill this information gap, but they're filling it with intentional disinformation. They pepper in these legitimate arguments with a bunch of bullshit in order to trick people into thinking that everything they say is valid. Here's another example. Hormonal birth control intensifies emotional reactions and alters how events are remembered. Research from Rice University finds hormonal birth control shapes emotional reactions and memory in ways that may impact mental health. What they don't mention in the quick summary of the study is that pregnancy, especially unplanned pregnancy, can also have massive impacts on women from the physical, emotional, social, financial aspects. The list goes on and on. Studies that look into birth control, like studies that look into all pharmaceuticals, are important, but they don't always show the whole picture. Evie consistently tells one side of the story, the anti-birth control side. Looking at all of this information, the big problem here is that the anti-birth control propaganda is working. According to a 2024 Kaiser Family Foundation survey, 1 in 7 women ages 18 to 25 said they made or thought about making a change to their contraceptive use after seeing the subject discussed on social media. And a 2024 TikTok study by Emily Fender and her team found that nearly 50% of the posts about birth control that they analyzed promoted discontinuation of contraception, with TikTok creators identifying 57 alleged negative side effects of hormonal contraceptives. So what do? When you're consuming content, be conscious of the messaging behind the posts you're seeing. What is their motive? Are they trying to sell you something? Are they benefiting from your skepticism in some way? If you have a positive experience with birth control, share your story. So much of what people see online is fear-mongering. I've been on birth control since I was 17, with only a 1-year break to conceive and have my daughter. And then I immediately got back on birth control, and I've had no negative side effects. I've been on multiple different hormonal birth control pills, and like I said, no negative side effects. And that story just doesn't get out there enough. And I get it. It's the same reason that people don't talk about like neutral experiences in Yelp reviews. They don't say like, this restaurant was fine, I enjoyed the food. People don't talk about it when they have a completely normal experience. They talk about it when something abnormal happens. So tell your story, share information that is actually accurate about birth control, and continue to fight for reproductive rights, from abortion to contraception to sex education. All right, everyone, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this kind of content, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, send it to a friend. I've been working really hard on creating worthwhile videos for you guys, and I would love to continue growing my YouTube channel. So please follow along if you like this content. I am on all social media as @IlianaJustine, and I would love to have you follow me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.